My name is Ron Heilling. I served in the U.S. Army Security Agency from 1961 to 1964. With help from my ASA friends, I decided to put my experiences in the agency on the CD because I was very proud to serve, and I wanted people it was like to be in the ASA. At this time, I would like to give a brief summary of the agency, when it started, how it changed. Up until 1942, the agency went through many changes and fell under different jurisdictions. Their primary functions never changed. The basic functions was to gather military intelligence necessary for protecting the United States from all present and possible enemies. You would be surprised if you knew who our enemies are. Just consider everyone our enemy, and you will be better off. In July of 1943, the Signal Intelligence Service was redesignated the Signal Security Agency. In December of 1944, the Military Intelligence Service assumed operational control of the agency, leaving the Signal Corps to carry on the administrative functions. The dual control lasted until the 15th of September 1945, when the Signal Security Agency was reorganized under the Assistant Chief of Staff, G2, War Department, as the Army Security Agency. With the end of World War II, a period of readjustment and reorganization began. There followed a steady depletion of agency personnel, which continued until the onset of hostilities in Korea in June of 1950, when the trend was finally reversed and wartime expansion begun. In July of 1949, the mutual cryptologic activities of the Army, Navy, and the Air Force were brought together into a single body, the Armed Forces Security Agency, or AFSA, which was staffed by each of the services through components drawn from Army Security Agency, Air Force Security Service, and Naval Security Group. As a result of a study which had been ordered by the President, AFSA became the National Security Agency, or NSA, in October of 1952. With the publication of AR 10-122 in June of 1955, the functions of the ASA were established essentially as they are at present. The United States Security Agency, up until the middle of the 1970s, the major command under the Department of the Army. The Commanding General, or the USASA, is the advisor to the Chief of Staff, the U.S. Army, and to elements of the Army staff on matters within their jurisdiction. He is the commander of a worldwide organization and has direct control over thousands of persons at over 100 locations scattered over the face of the earth. After basic training, which I had at Fort Ord, I went to Fort Bragg, and training began with Special Forces. My training at that time was highly classified, and I cannot divulge what I was trained in at that time with Special Forces. After that, I went to Fort Devens, Massachusetts for my formal intelligence training. I was there for over 6 months. I made a lot of friends there, and it was the most important part of my life. I was blessed to be with the greatest persons on this earth. Today I keep in contact with many of these who served with me. I would like to mention some of them who served with me. These are in no particular order of importance. They're all equal to me. Dennis Morga, Ted Woolridge, Dale Shreve, Dave Turrison, Alvin Joyner, Paul Drosdick, Jerry Going, Jim Marshall, Lee Powell, Willie Weir, Wayne Hendricks, Ron Newlander, Rick Carter, and so many, many more, too many to mention here. All I can say is God bless you all for enriching my life. When we were at Fort Devens, experienced many things. We had really a good time. We'd march to school every day and then march back, and once we got back to the barracks, we were pretty much free to do what we wanted to. The only thing that was upsetting when we had a lot of snow was once in a while we had to pick what they call barracks guard, and we had to, with a flashlight, walk around the barracks for a couple hours, and then we would change guards and someone else would do it. It wasn't fun, but we had to do it. And after all, we were in the Army, so we managed. We had good clothing, so we kept warm. There were some times when we had over 10 feet of snow. I remember waking up, and Ted Woolridge had a bunk right next to me, and he was shocked. He couldn't believe we had so much snow there. It piled up on the windows. We couldn't even look out the windows. It was unbelievable. There was an incident at the mess hall, at Comp 4 they call it, which I'll talk about later. We enjoyed the places that we went. We went all over the state of Massachusetts and primarily to Boston. And the training was real fun. We had one scary experience there. I was with Tel Woolridge and a couple other guys. We went to the Comp 4, which is a big mess hall, because there were other parts of the Army that were located there on that base. It wasn't just ASA. We were sitting in the mess hall, just talking like guys normally do about different things, and all of a sudden I saw a couple of people fall over out of their seats onto the floor, moaning and groaning, and I said, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" Then more guys were falling over, putting their head on the table, knocking their food off the table. It was unbelievable, and it was happening all over the mess hall. And Ted and I looked at each other and said, "What is going on here?" And then we figured out it must be something that they ate. That's the only thing they had in common. So we looked down at our plate, and I said, "I wonder what it could be." And luckily, Ted and I decided to pass the mashed potatoes because they had little brown specks in them, and it didn't look right. So we passed the mashed potatoes up, and we had something else with our food. Well, we found out afterwards that the one of the cooks got drunk, came on shift. He had a grudge against his sergeant. So what he went around emptied all of the rat and mouse traps where the rats and the mice were already rotting on them, and he put them in the cutter, cut them all up, mixed them in with the mashed potatoes, and that's what caused it. And we were on the news all over the country. My mom saw it on national TV, one of the networks, and she called the base there at our barracks office and company office, and I wanted to know what was going on. And they left a message for me, so I got the message, and I called them back and said that don't worry about it. I didn't eat any mashed potatoes. So, in fact, the rest of the time in the Army, most of us were kind of afraid to eat mashed potatoes, and we always made sure there were no brown specks in them. So that was a mess. The other thing we did, we had a frozen lake, a frozen pond on our base, and we would get our toboggans, rent a toboggan there. That was really free. Then we go down the hill and into the soft snow onto the ice, and it was just unbelievable, freezing. It was terrible, but it was fun. I do have a video that I made of Fort Devens. It's one of the rarest videos back in those days, and it also has some parts of Okinawa on it. And this is available to only the ASA members. If they want it, they can purchase it for a very small price, and I'll have it on a DVD for them. But the training was really fun. We had what's called 058 training, which was a Morse intercept, mainly because that's the way they communicated at that time, the military. And even though we had people that translated from the different languages, we had to be able to copy Morse code while we were in school, and we learned the basics of radio wave propagation. But we had a pretty good time, and everybody had a lot of fun there. And we all got along well, and we played a lot of cards. And some of the guys did a little drinking, but we all made it and survived, and we all enjoyed each other's company. And at the end of our training, everybody took off to their next military base. So we missed a lot of our friends when that happened. After Fort Devens, I was sent to Okinawa, Japan, and stationed at Tori Station, which was an ASA base. It was private and secured. What an experience that was. The funny thing, during our training at Fort Devens, we all put in for different places where we'd like to go. And we were told that the people that were top in their class would get their first pick of where to go. Well, was I surprised. What they did was they assigned people the bases depending upon where they were needed with their skills. So we had a different MOS. MOS is what your duty is, your duty skills. They call it MOS in all the military such as our Marine Corps. Marine Corps and Navy are one unit, and the Coast Guard, and then we had the Air Force. And we had a lot of sharp guys in our class. We were really all excited. We all put in where we wanted to go. Of course, everybody, they might not have openings for everybody that wanted to go to a particular place. Everybody knew that, so you put a second and third choice down. Well, I put down Fort Huachuca, Arizona, because it wasn't far from Southern California. And then I put down Hawaii. Well, that didn't work. Even though I was in the top of my class, they sent me to Okinawa. Mainly because Okinawa needed some really good people. It was one of the key bases because of its location, just south of Japan. Most of our major enemies were Korea, North Korea, China, and Russia. Well, we took off on a plane, and we landed on Okinawa at Kadena Air Force Base. What an experience. The island didn't look like much from the air. It's only 75 miles wide or something like that long, and had a real strange shape to it. We got off the plane, and we immediately experienced culture shock. I mean, everything seemed different there. You could smell it in the air. Everybody looked different, dressed different, the buildings were different. And one of the problems was the smell in the air. It was very humid and very hot, and we said to ourselves, oh my goodness, what is that smell? And nobody seemed to know, of course. We were all pretty new and never been there. And so when we got into the terminal, we were talking about that, and some of the Okinawans that spoke English heard us and came over and says, oh, you know, like you smell of benjo ditches? And I said, what the hell is a benjo ditch? And they said, oh, it's where all our waste is. It's the toilet. It's our toilet. And along the side of the roads, they had benjo ditches. And that's what the smell was. And with the humidity and the moisture in the air, the smell just, permeated the entire area. And of course, on Okinawa, they had a different climate. It was very humid and hot, and it's kind of cool in the wintertime. They had typhoons. They had rain. It was very muggy there. And, of course, the smell of benjo ditches, open sewers. And the people were quite different in culture. They all looked alike at first because, we didn't really have much experience with the Orientals. We had everything on our base, and that was really nice. It wasn't a big base, but it was a private base. And while we were there, we did a lot of things. The troops kept quite busy. We did a lot of things in the barracks. A lot of people would read, listen to music, and so forth, go down, play pool, watch TV, ping pong. There were things like that right in the barracks. But a lot of us took martial arts, and we all had other hobbies, and a lot of us went diving, skin diving. All this was really free. And fishing, deep sea fishing, or fishing off the coast. We went bar hopping. We went traveling all over the island and buying different things to send back to the States. So that was kind of fun. And we watched movies, and we enjoyed the local entertainment that was there. We had fun in our NCO clubs, and there were a lot of other things to do, of course. You might think of, what was our purpose there? What was our purpose there? Well, Chi-Coms, Chinks, Chinese. All the information we are about to discuss is not classified, and it's known to the general public if they want to find it. These experiences happened back in the 1960s, and not relevant at this time. Things were different. We will discuss some events in great detail. I will not discuss some of our methodology or the special equipment that we used, but only the events relating to our purpose and our goals. I'd like to talk about some of the incidents. On more than one occasion, paratroopers taking practice jumps landed on our little base, and one time many of them landed in our swimming pool. There was an abandoned airstrip across the road, and that was always the target, but they missed it on many occasions. It was called Yamitan Airstrip. We also saw a tanker explode and catch fire at Kadena Air Base, which was a short distance away, and we go up to our mailroom on a little hill, and we can look down and see almost see the entire base. That air base had the reputation of being the safest air base in the world. There was a school just outside the base that had some damage, and luckily none of the children got hurt. There were many typhoons that hit the islands. They are the same as hurricanes, but usually larger and more powerful because the Pacific waters are much warmer than the Atlantic. We had many typhoons that had winds over 200 miles per hour. That is something to experience, believe me. Just like a tornado, but it's blowing constantly. We had to walk around our base with ponchos on and our steel helmets with goggles. Many times we had to hold hands while walking to our mess hall and to our operations building. Any place we went on base, it was terrible. The rain was coming down sideways, and if you kept your mouth open, you could really drown. That's how fast it was coming down. The rain was blowing sideways, as I said before. And on one occasion, the storm was so powerful that it broke the windows on one side of our barracks. We had to move all of our beds and lockers to the other side because the water was coming in so fast, it went down the stairs, looked like a waterfall. The trees were totally bent over, and it got very, very scary. On our little base, we had our own theater, our own NCO club, our hobby shop, our pool, our PX. We had a barber shop and a tennis court, a basketball court, baseball field. We had just about everything you can imagine on our little base. We had it all. It was a very small base with only a couple hundred ASA troops there. We also had the largest rhombic antenna field in the world. The most important incidents we experienced were the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Kennedy assassination.
On October 22, 1962, President John F. Kennedy broadcast a special message to the nation from his office in the White House. Here is President Kennedy as he delivered that message, bearing on recent events in Cuba.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere.
During the missile crisis, we had to track and position every Russian submarine and aircraft carrier in the Russian fleet. We worked with our base in Korea and Japan and the island of Shimei, Alaska. Often, we were also involved in the process, and with other stations besides those. We were the closest to most ships. We also had to pinpoint all the Russian missile launchers in the Soviet Union, including the underground silos with ICBMs, IRBMs. The bases on land were to launch ICBMs. They had a range anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 miles. The IRBMs that were located on ships, most of them, had a range of from 1,500 to 2,500 miles approximately. The subs were located in strategic locations surrounding the U.S. We knew where everything was, and we had our missiles and aircraft prepared to take out all of them, and then some. The Russians had their primary targets, such as our military bases in major cities in the U.S. Americans knew nothing about what was going on. I spoke Russian, and I helped out with some transmissions emanating to and from those ships and on the land bases. That was not my responsibility, as we were there to monitor CHICOM military. Most of our radio equipment consisted of R390s. That receiver was fantastic. And we had fax machines and other equipment, highly secret, and I cannot disclose what they were. We were a primary DF site, which means directional finding. We used triangulation techniques to pinpoint the location of the radio transmissions. Therefore, we can pinpoint the ship or the base where the transmissions were coming from. There were three basic types of transmissions. Most were set in Morse code, voice, and automatic Morse code. We were hardly trained to copy those transmissions, mostly by hand, using a special typewriter called a mill. You had to really pound hard on the keys. It was something else, but we had to copy a lot of numbers along with the letters, and a few other things that were on there that weren't on regular typewriters. We had live translators recording voice transmissions. The automatic code transmissions were first recorded and then slowed down so that they could be copied better. The people out in Okinawa were generally friendly, but most of them did not like the Americans on their island. At one time, Ted Woolridge and I caught two houseboys going through our mail in the trash cans. We caught two of them, of course, and there were others probably doing it, but we only caught two. We reported it to our first sergeant, and he told us to leave them alone. We were all shocked at what he said. We told all of them in the barracks to watch what they put in the trash cans. The bar girls were always examining our hands, trying to figure out what kind of work we did. They would usually say something like, "Your hands are soft. Do you type or work inside?" You can guess what they were implying. We had to be very careful where we went and what we did. There were thousands of communists on the island, many of whom targeted us. The Japanese and Okinawans were not happy about the outcome of the war, even though the Okinawans were not friendly with the Japanese. They used to hide from the Japanese during the war because their young men were being recruited and taken away by the Japanese government. They hid in caves and other places. One morning, after I was cleared to go back to the States, I was taking a nap, and someone woke me up and said that I have to go down to the operations building now. I had already cleared post, so I didn't even have a badge anymore. So I asked him, "What is wrong?" And he replied that Kennedy was just shot. I cannot believe my ears. I rushed down to Ops and had to get a temporary badge to enter. When I got there, I saw a picture of a young man on our fax machine. I asked who that man was, and they told me his name was Oswald. Who was he? I had no idea. Kennedy had just expired, and they knew who shot him. I asked how they caught him, and they said that they didn't catch him yet. You can imagine the questions that went through our mind. There was a lot of speculation on all of our parts, but we had no clue to exactly what happened. As things played out, we were totally confused. All the military was put on a high alert, but we were able to board the troop carrier ship, the USS Breckenridge, and go back to the States. We all knew what after that. It was all abrupt. We all knew it. We did not talk about it with each other after we left the island. It was about Christmas now, and after a short leave, I was sent to Fort Walters near Fort Worth, Texas. It was also a primary helicopter base. It was located in Mineral Wells. My friend Ted Woolridge was happy because he was born and raised there. He had a great family there, and there was not too much to do, so we still managed to have some fun. The only fast food place in town was a Dairy Queen. We usually went to Fort Worth or Dallas if we really wanted to have some fun and get away. Some of us rented two small houses, which were on the same lot, right on the main highway. The rent was cheap, and we enjoyed living off base. Our backyard was right up against the base, at the fence, and there was a gate that made it easy to go back and forth when we had to go to work. While we were at Fort Walters, we were invited to participate in Operation Desert Strike. This was held in Mojave Desert. It was the largest peacetime maneuvers ever held in peacetime in the United States. It was quite an experience. We had about 20 vehicles on our convoy, and we stopped overnight at different towns at National Guard armories. We stopped in Winslow, Arizona, and we were greeted by Girl Scouts and ladies who had a buffet ready for us. It was just great. Many of us went home with some of the girls, and their parents made us dinner. I went with a Native American. It sure broke the monotony of that boring trip. We arrived at our secret location. It was in the middle of the desert, middle of nowhere. For sure, I didn't really know where we were after we got off the truck. We had to camouflage all of our vehicles and equipment. We all slept in our two-man shelter house, or pup tents, as some people would call it. We took shower trips every day and stopped in a bar called the Honolulu Club. They were great to us. We could not talk about our mission with them, and they understood why. A few years ago, while on a trip with my family, I stopped at that same bar, and they remembered us. They were so happy to see me. The owner was the daughter of the original owner. She was a little girl at the time that we first went there. I could not stay there long, so we had to continue on our way. When we were there, during Operation Desert Strike, that was the place we went to get a nice sandwich, a nice cold beer, soft drinks, some chips. It was really, really just like being home. Anyway, we continued on our trip. We had some old pictures of the bar, and I made enlargements of them, ones that I took during Operation Desert Strike, and I took some new ones of the place when I was there visiting years later. I sent some of the enlargements to some of my buddies who were there with me in the 1960s, and they just really appreciated those pictures. At the end of the 3 weeks, we headed back to Fort Walters. It seemed like a long trip. It seemed boring for us. On the way, our deuce and a half broke down, and we got left behind without them even noticing that we were missing. The driver, his name was Skidmore, was a mechanic. He fixed it by taking out the air cleaner and souping up the engine. He made it into a military hot rod. We went down the highway at about 100 miles per hour, and we were bouncing around in the back, and none of us could take a nap for sure, and we were quite sore when we got off of that thing. We had the local radio station on, and we learned on the news flash that it said a rogue military vehicle was spotted going over 100 miles per hour, and nobody knew where it came from. That was really, when we heard that, we didn't know whether to laugh or to cry, but it was really a lot of fun. They didn't know where we were headed either, or where we came from. Anyway, we all laughed, and believe it or not, we caught up with our convoy. They did not miss us, or know that we were missing. After we caught up, the Texas troopers pulled all of us over, and they wanted to know which one of our trucks was missing. They were told that all were present. Our sergeant told the troopers that none of the vehicles could go faster than 75 miles per hour, empty. The troops laughed, shook his hand, and he told us to be careful on the way back to Fort Walters. We will all never forget that trip ever. Some of us were ordered to serve temporary duty in Petaluma, California for a month or two at Two Rock Ranch. Sounds like an old Western movie title. It was a fun trip. It was north of San Francisco in Northern California. While there, some of us, including my great friend Jim Marshall, had a unique experience. We met with my cousin, Russ the Moose Syracuse, who was the #1 DJ in California. He played oldies on station KYA. He took us out to eat, and we went night clubbing with him. We really enjoyed that experience. We saw Red Fox and Carol Data, who was an erotic dancer, at the Condor Club. Next to the club where Red Fox was, it was called the Purple Onion. After our short time there, we went back to Fort Walters and wanted to be discharged from active duty. My time in the ESA was an experience I will never forget, and my friends feel the same way. I must tell all of you that as long as the agency exists, you will all be safe here in the States because you have the best there is protecting you. They're all soldiers. Don't forget that. You don't hear much about them, but they are there doing their best for all of us. They changed the names of the agency over the years and equipment which is being used now. I need to tell you a couple of things that I think you should all know. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, Premier Khrushchev was extremely upset at the whole mess, and he was just 15 seconds from starting a nuclear war with us. Just 15 seconds. That was verified by his brother and staff members who were there with him at the time. All of us should really think about it. It could happen again, and probably will. The next time, the world might not be so lucky. There's a lot of proof that the Japanese were developing the atomic bomb in a town in Korea, and they were just a couple of months away from being able to use it. It is my opinion that they would have used it if they were given the chance. All of us salute our troops, and especially those in the intelligence community. May ASA live forever, and God bless everybody, all of our troops today, and all the wonderful Americans who support us. This is Dr. Ron Heilling saying goodbye, and did-it-da-da-da, or SK.